was indeed the final 105-98 in favor of Boston. They now lead the series 2-0, Blake. And I guess the big question, let's start here because we got a lot of Mavs conversations to have, NBA Finals conversations to have all the way throughout this evening, including your game notes here in about 20 minutes. But let's start here. Will the Mavs regret not getting game 2? It was crazy because during the course of the game, obviously trying to prepare for tonight, I was starting to kind of ask myself some of the questions, and we'll be, asking some of those questions over the course of the night. Your questions as well, obviously, on the Franklin Injury Attorney text line 877-881-1053. But during the fourth quarter and before the Mavs had that little run to get it down to 5 late in the fourth, you started getting that feeling like, oh, okay, they're not going to get this one. And with the many things that we saw, including a Boston Celtics team that depends heavily on the three-point shot, not knocking down threes, and in the first half, not even getting up the number of threes that they typically want to shoot. It felt like this was your opportunity to take one, and you didn't get it. Let's start here. Will the Mavs regret not getting game 2 here, Blake?
Yes, they will regret not getting game 2. As I shared in the crosstalk, the Celtics, the only 2 games they've lost during these playoffs have been game 2s, which happen to be at home. Lost one to Cleveland, and then in their second series, who did they play?
They lost. They played Miami in the first.
Miami in first, Cleveland second. And those were the 2 losses with game 2. They've been below 500 in the last couple of years at home. I thought this would be. We talked about Luka being the best player after a loss, averaging the most points, around 35, and I feel like he showed up to the party. He did his thing, but my overall consensus on this, tell me if I'm wrong, feels like everyone outside of Luka, the moment's just too big for them. And it feels weird to say about Kyrie, who has won a championship, who we know can play above kind of the extracurricular stuff and can have these historic performances. It feels like, and I'm not saying Kyrie's like nervous and doesn't know how to play basketball, but just to his standard, feels like everyone else other than Luka, the lights are too bright out there. You see Dante Exum, Josh Green, Jones, like they get out there, they're dribbling off their foot, they're missing rotations. Now it gets better as the game goes on, and I thought this wasn't I think the Dallas Mavericks played, I don't know, a C+ game, and I think the Boston Celtics played a B+ game and ended up winning. And you could even say in that first half, the Celtics played a C game with all their threes that they were missing. I thought they did a lot of other things good, but to me, this is a really big game to drop. When teams go down 2-0, there's been 36 teams that have done that. Only 5 teams have come back to win that series. Now, one of them was Kyrie's team, and Luka's also come back.
The 2016 Cavs?
Yep. And Luka's team in 2022 came down from 2-0 against the Phoenix Suns, who happened to be the best team in basketball record-wise that year. That wasn't the NBA Finals, but they did do it. So you have 2 guys that have come back from 2-0 in a series, so I do think it is still plausible. But to say that you wanted to lose this game or anything is just incorrect. You let one fall through the cracks that you should have been able to bounce back in.
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, you talked about kind of how it felt like outside of Luka Doncic, folks felt like the moment was too big for them.
Yep.
And I don't know if I fully agree with that perspective. I understand like the outcome ended up looking like this, but I think some of this has to be a credit to the Celtics. And look, I understand. I know where I'm broadcasting from. My feet currently exist in Dallas, Texas. And ain't nobody want to go and give the Boston Celtics credit right now. However, I feel like it's necessary. And on the text line from the 806, they said, not saying the Celtics coach isn't good, but let's be honest, having the talent he has to work with does make it pretty easy to look like a genius. And
I think both can be true.
I disagree with the way that they've situated that, right? Like clearly there's talent on that team, but what has made that Boston team impressive right now is not just like pure raw talent and athletic ability. And although if we talk about talent, it doesn't just have to be athletic ability. It's that these dudes are all playing together as a team, as one. And I think that that's what makes it, like as a juxtaposition, makes the Mavs look like they are not nearly up to the standard. And they haven't been up to the standard, to be fair, thus far. Not even up to their personal standard. But you compare the Mavericks defensively, where there's lapses when Luka's trying to kick out a defender to try and, be able to kick out Lively, right? From a pick and roll to be able to like hide him from certain situations, and they're not on it. You look over at Boston, and I can't come off of the top of my head, and if maybe there are instances, there's maybe like 2 of them over the course of these 2 games where they have not looked like they have been like they're a hive mind. They're moving together as one. They know what the objective is, and they're executing. And that's all the way down where you talk about defensively, offensively, like they are moving together. And it's one of the reasons why they were in this game and why they won this game, the Boston Celtics did, because they kept the Mavericks under 100 points again. And that's not something that happens a lot to this team. Like, those are the things that over there makes them look good. And I think, you know, when you're side by side with them in that game, when your guys aren't on their P's and Q's down to a point, when they're not necessarily moving without thinking, right? Those moments where you can see the gears turning for the Mavs as they're trying to execute things, I think that ends up being the difference in these things. And I think that's what makes it look like they're not ready for the moment. I feel like they've played decent, and of course there's still places to get better, but I think some of this is like you have to tip your cap to what the Boston Celtics have done in being like really locked in as a team.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. The Mavs players look out of sorts on too many occasions, whether that's defensive or offense. I mean, Reggie, the first play of the game, they get a fast break layup where no one's guarding Drew Holiday under the basket. Like, there's just too many mental lapses, and I don't want to pinpoint because I'm not in that locker room, so I'm not going to do that. I don't know who to put that on, but there's just too many mental lapses where guys on the Mavs, I noticed it in the second half, how many times the Celtics set a screen and both the Mavs players roll with the roller and the ball handler's wide open, or vice versa. They both stay with the ball handler and the roller's wide open. Like, I can count 5 or 6 times that happened in the second half. And the only reason that maybe it's not getting talked about as much is Boston was missing those shots. Boston missed 17 open threes. That does not happen often with the best 3-point shooting team in the league. So as on the defensive side especially, they have to get better communication. They have to get on the same page. It feels like, are we switching? Are we blitzing?
Yeah.
Are we really showing defensive pressure? Are we gap? And then for the Celtics, they know every single play what they do. Okay, we're just helping, we're bouncing out, we're taking away the corner three, we're leaving the above the break three consistently every time. Like, they are not changing. And when they do change, every single person on the court knows why they're changing, what they're doing, who to leave open, who not to leave open, what to take away. It just feels like they are more on one accord. Feels like they've been here before. As we know, they've been to the finals before. A lot of these players, they were prepared. I talked about in the cross with those off days, those 9 days off, to have a game plan. And it feels like the Mavs are very reactive. Something happens, like, oh, we have to cover this. Oh, this happens, we have to do this. Oh, we haven't seen this. Like, it just feels like we are not ready for the moment. Like, we haven't really awoken. There is some positives to take away, and we'll detail that throughout the show. But on the scope, looking out, it's not looking like the Mavs were as prepared as the Boston Celtics.
But with that being the case, again, this Boston Celtics team looked like they could not, I mean, not even looked. It really and truly could not knock down the shot that they were looking for. This Mavs team seemed to do a little bit better at playing them on the perimeter early in this game and making it so that they couldn't get up as many shots as they wanted to. If I remember correctly, I think they got something like 19 3-pointers up in the first half. And even that is, or it might have been even fewer if I go back and double check, but I vividly remember looking at the number of 15 3-pointers up in the first half, which is not on pace with what they typically want to do.
They went 3 of 15.
Right? Like that is, if you're just looking at that portion of the box score, that was a success for the Mavericks. And still, right, you get to halftime and you're not in the lead as you need to be, right? At halftime, you're down, right? And then there's points in the game where you lead. They're not shooting well, the Celtics are. This felt like an opportunity to take advantage of the Celtics, who we've already noted have been clicking very well. And I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves coming into the series, probably the better team overall. That doesn't mean they have to win the series. And in order for you to do those things where you win the series against a team that is probably the better team overall, you have to hit all the notes. And it felt like there was a lot of places, although you did some great things. Luka Doncic looked like he was like, look, I understand that the diet's going to be mid-range shots. I might not get as many threes. I definitely am going to have a little bit harder time getting all the way to the rim, but I'm going to knock all these down. Felt like he was playing at that level. You have to be able to execute and maximize that opportunity, and it felt like they did.
And I think that's the hard part is game one, that I was able to swallow that. We're terrible in game ones. Porzingis felt like a shooting aberration. They couldn't miss from 3 if they tried. And I was like, I literally said it before the series, that there's going to be a game where the Boston Celtics just destroy you from 3 and you lose that. And I'm able to live with that. I didn't think we were going to sweep them. And then I was like, game 2, I expected to kind of go how it did, where it's kind of back and forth. Both teams aren't shooting well. It's going to come down to the clutch and the Mavs take over. But the biggest problem of this series is Jason Tatum is able to pick any defender he wants out, mainly Luka, I have to call it how it is, and beat them off the dribble. And then it puts everybody else in a scramble drill. And the Mavs are got better defensively, but they are not good enough defensively to be in a 24/7 scramble drill with 37% three-point shooters and above all around the floor. And Derek Lively is never near the rim anymore because of Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. So now you just don't have that rim pressure. We talked about it a little bit in the break. A lot of times the low man, and if you don't know what that means, the guy that's closest to the basket, the guy that's in the last spot in the rotation, away from the ball, it's Luka, it's Kyrie, it's Josh Green, it's these smaller guards, and Luka I know is not smaller, but not the best rim protector in the world. Now you have Tatum driving, and they're the guy that has to make the decision. Do I help on Tatum? Do I jump to the corner three and leave Derek White and Drew Holiday wide open? And a lot of times they're not, either whether they're making the right decision or not. Boston is just continuously second, third, fourth, fifth drive, every possession making you work, where it feels like Dallas is 1 or 2 drives, didn't work. Shot either goes in, shot doesn't go in, they're back on defense.
Yeah, and I remind me to come back to, there's a few stats that I have Yaya Dubin tweeted out that I thought were very interesting to talk about that. But I want to talk about missed opportunities, because that's what we're hitting at here. When game 2, this was a missed opportunity. And Luka Doncic, in post-game availability, jumped out very quickly, took responsibility, and pointed to some places where he felt like there were some missed opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it didn't work because we lost. But, you know, at the end of the day, we got to make some more shots. You know, I think my turnovers and my missed free throws cost us a game. So I got to do way better in those 2 categories. But at the end of the day, we got to make shots to win the game.
Yep. You had it in front of you, and you soiled it. And I wish, I'll say this, Reggie, can you put it on one person? I can't. I know a lot of fans like to do that and say, well, if this one player showed up, we would have won. I just think right now you're at a disadvantage where you don't have any room for error. The Celtics have room for error. Tatum is shooting the worst in the finals out of anybody in NBA history at around 35%. He cannot buy a bucket, but he is still creating for his team. And they still can win. I don't think he hasn't scored 20 points in either game, if I'm correct. If Luka doesn't score more than 20, we obviously know what's going to happen. Like, there's just not as much room for error for the Mavs.
No, and that's been the case. But yeah, I think Luka is right in one regard. I'm not putting it solely on his shoulders, because there's, in any game, there's a lot of things that you can deal with. But again, the final score 105-98. That is a difference of 7 points, clearly, right? Mm-hmm. And people on the text line, up and down, have mentioned this. But let's go to it. From the free throw line, the Dallas Mavericks shot 16 of 24. That is 66.7%. Let's say that you don't make 100% of your free throws. That seems like that might be an unfair expectation.
Unless you're the Celtics, who had that all the way through the third.
You had 8 free throws that you missed. Let's say you make 6 of those. Now look at the difference in what that game looks like. And of course, look, there's the butterfly effect kind of theory. If one shot goes down, does that change the way that the rest of the games go? Sure, right? I'm not saying that that's absolutely going to change the way that game goes, but that's in there, right? Luka Doncic. And I don't know if you hadn't looked at the box score already, how many turnovers would you assume Luka Doncic had by watching it? And I don't know if I had the right answer, because I looked at it and I was like, damn, 8 turnovers? And yes, 8 turnovers by Luka Doncic. Far and away an anomaly, considering that this Mavs team typically gave up, like, somewhere around 12, 13 turnovers over the course of an entire games, right? So 8 turnovers is huge. And if you go over and you look, the Boston Celtics had 15 fast break points. A few of those, Jaylen Brown dunks, right? When you talk about those fast, that's another instance where, those margins are really thin when we talk about the playoffs. And those are absolutely places where those are things that you can control relatively easily yourself. Before we even get into some of the schematics and some of those other things, being cleaner on those things gives you a much better opportunity to maximize the opportunities that are there. And this was definitely one for the Mavericks that they didn't grab.
My last point on this, the Celtics feel like it is a team effort, that all these guys can step up and help this team. They're the second team with 5 players with 15 points per game through 2 games in the finals since the 87 Lakers. Jaylen Brown with 21.5, Jason Tatum with 17, Porzingis with 16, Derek White with 16.5, and Drew Holiday with 19. Number 1 being Luka, and then far after that is Mr. Kyrie Irving, who's not even averaging 16. So you have 5 different Celtics in between Luka and Kyrie as far as points per game right now. You're not going to win the NBA Finals with that right there.
And that's considering, again, the thing that they like, hinging their game on, 3-point shooting, wasn't with them last night. So yeah, I definitely think that the Mavericks are going to regret, not getting game 2 because there's only 7 of these at maximum. You need to get to 4 of them, and now you put yourself in a situation where if you want to get through this, you got to win 4 out of 5. And that's never an easy task, and especially it's a tough task against the way that the Celtics are playing. But we do need to keep ourselves in that place and remember that this is the Celtics team winning 2 games at home. You typically want to see if you can get a split, but it's not the end of the world if you don't get a split. They do, however, need to make sure that they're on their P's and Q's because the margin for error is no longer existent for these Mavericks. So they got to get on their grind, and they'll try and do that on Wednesday when the games return to Dallas, return to the American Airlines Center, and that one tips off 7:37 exactly at the AAC.